Welcome to our Awakening Together YouTube channel. This is our live satsang that we had with John Astin. He was interviewed by Anne Blanchard. If you'd like more information on John Astin, you can visit his website, johnastin.com. For more information about our non-dual community or to join us live, visit our website, awakening-together.org. Please remember to subscribe and click that bell for more notifications. Thank you for watching.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Sina. Thank you so much. And welcome. I want to call you Dr. Astin, but it sounds like people call you John Astin, but I can call you Dr. John Astin. I want to welcome you. We're thrilled to have you. What should I call you?
John is perfect.
Okay, John's perfect. Thank you. Okay. It's just my training. So John's got a whole lot. John is wow, what an amazing life. So I'll read you a little bio just at the top of this. He's the author of 4 books. Too Intimate for Words. This Is Always Enough. Searching for Rain in a Monsoon. And his most recent book, This Extraordinary Moment. He's also a singer. He's a songwriter. He has over half a dozen CDs of original material. Gorgeous, that Sina was just referencing that we play here in the sanctuary. And he also, in his spare time, went and got a little Ph.D. Is a little bit of is an internationally known expert in several different domains, which we will get into, having to do with how practices interface with well-being, interface with addiction, interface meditation, how they get integrated. I mean, there's just this vast array, bringing these contemplative practices into real life, into the real life world, with people that have all manner of medical issues and mental health issues and substance abuse issues. And he's also presently an adjunct professor of clinical counseling psychology at Santa Clara and Notre Dame de Namur universities. So lots happening. So first, I just want to say welcome and thank you so much for taking time to be with us tonight.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Anne.
Wonderful. Here's the. So I grabbed little snippets, and one of them is what John looks at and speaks about. And what his life's about is looking at the nature of human awareness and its relationship to well-being and human flourishing. And I just love that. I mean, it's the nature of what we are, human awareness, and how that interacts with experientially our own knowing of our well-being, and then more broadly human flourishing. And so I just want to start by giving you a chance to speak to that, because what a cool way to design your life to have that be at the center of it.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say, and thanks for the introduction, kind introduction, Anne. It's funny because I just was catching a little bit as I tuned in earlier to the gathering coming together, getting a little feel for some of the way, this group, or at least some in the group, to kind of talk about all of this and hearing things about awareness. And it's interesting because I used to talk a lot about awareness and a lot less so now. It's interesting. Some of that will probably come out in the course of our conversation. So that's probably an earlier description. I really talk a lot more about experience more generally, because it's all encompassing. Of course, you could talk about awareness in an all encompassing sense as well. But experience is a word that I find to be, it seems like one of the challenges with words. The first book you mentioned that I wrote is called Too Intimate for Words, which pretty much says it all. That discovery is really, that's the game changer, to discover that what's happening here is entirely not resolvable conceptually or linguistically at all. I mean, really at all. And that has profound implications, because we're walking around as humans for the most part imagining that we actually know what things are because we have ways of describing them, right? And that thread of from that first book moving forward, even though you can track sort of different ways my own understanding unfolded, then was reflected in each subsequent book, that theme, that thread has gone through all of them and sort of culminated in the last book, This Extraordinary Moment, where the entire dive of the book and the inquiries in the book are all about discovering the ways in which experience does radically transcend everything we conceive of it to be. Yeah, so, and of course, to that comment you made, or that quote of mine describing my work, that has, of course, huge implications for well-being, and the discovery of what we could call a well-being that's not conditioned upon any particular experiences or circumstances, which is how, well, of course, we ordinarily think of well-being, existing in certain particular aspects of experience, certain particular states, certain particular circumstances. And what I'm pointing to is, we could say, another dimension of well-being, or another realm of well-being that transcends differences and distinctions entirely. So, yeah.
And transcends in the sense that it is the constant, it is what's available.
Right. Transcends, yeah, in the sense of it's, yeah, it is really that which is common to all that seems to be so different and distinct. Exactly. Yeah. It transcends all the apparent hierarchy of experience that really is a function of language and conceptualization, that creates that sense of this is whatever it is we're aspiring to realize in life as a human, more peace, more well-being, more freedom, more happiness. Again, we have this sense of the particulars of experience driven very much by how we're defining and describing things as being where we can locate those things we're searching for. Like, now I've got it, I'm free. Or now I've got it, I'm finally feeling that happiness and joy that I wanted. And then, of course, it slips away, because that's the nature of everything, as it slips away. Which maybe, if you just had to realize one thing, it might be that, just to realize that nothing stays at all, because of the nature of this is pure dynamism, it would seem, pure aliveness. And so, yeah, things don't endure, even though we live in a world that certainly appears to have stability and endurance and continuity in many respects, which is how we see all these things, all these apparent forms. But when we look a little more carefully, we can discover that none of that holds up under scrutiny, as it turns out, which is one of the reasons, and maybe the most powerful or simplest way to discover that this is beyond comprehension entirely. Because all of our knowledge is based on the idea that things have thingness to them, right? That you can actually name them and describe them and encapsulate them as something that's reifiable, that's definable, and in large part, owing to the dynamic nature of what's appearing, that turns out to be an impossibility, the describing and the naming, even though it's very paradoxical, because it kind of seems like we know what things are. I know I'm talking to another human. I know I'm on a computer. I know it's evening time in California. But from another perspective, none of this is comprehensible. And that's what I mean by transcendental, that it's basically infinite, and all of our concepts and language suggest finiteness and are really based upon the notion that this is, in fact, can be circumscribed in some way by our conceptualizing and our interpreting. So yeah, it's quite something to discover that that's actually not the case. Because the consensus reality is, that we know what's going down, we know what's going on here. And it's pretty convincing. Our knowledge is pretty convincing.
And not just what's going on, we know what it means, and we know what it means for an us, and I know what it means for you, and I know what it doesn't mean for them, and
yes.
Everything.
The layers upon layers upon layers of I know what this is. Yes.
And sometimes I really, really, really know, because I have 6 stories that I can prove it to you.
Oh yeah. No, that's the elaborations don't end at the initial naming and describing. Go on and on. Yeah, often. Exactly. Yeah.
Beautiful. So as tempting it is to dive off the deep end, right?
Yeah, we did just went straight. That's my usual mode. So sorry about that. But
no, absolutely.
It seems unavoidable these days. So
love it. And I also know I have privilege of kind of knowing a little bit of your backstory and the history. And I just think that is just it's a lovely way to frame. So clearly now you're looking and you're describing so articulately. I mean, you're just so fluid with the words, and it just, for me, it feels like I'm, like Willy Wonka, like I loved candy as a kid. And I feel like when you speak, I'm in my Willy Wonka spiritual world, because all the words kind of hit, but then dissolve and point to what you're pointing to. And yet you didn't, you didn't start there, right? You started as, and I'm just
definitely
curious.
not.
Yeah. And from what I understand, you did not grow up in a particularly religious / spiritual family. And
Right.
So would love for you to give us a little context and arc to how this all kind of the scene came.
Yeah. Well, that of course is, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version to see how I do that. I mean, I did not grow up in any spiritual tradition. I think that, well, it was of course perfect. It was how my own unfolding as a young person happened, and my particular parents didn't push any set of beliefs or ideologies on me in a spiritual religious sense. And I developed my own kind of, honestly, sort of atheism as a teenager. Although it was not something I contemplated a lot. But I remember I was just talking with a friend about this earlier today, that I remember questioning the notion of like God. And I remember asking the question, it felt like it was a non-explanation for how all of this is here in a way, because I could feel my curious young mind sort of going, yeah, but what created God? So it was that sense of like, wait a minute, there's something more endless to this somehow. There's something more, because I think the way we sort of tend to often conceptualize something like God in a more traditional sense is we tend to kind of conceive of it, right? In ways that we tend to conceive of other things too. And so recognizing kind of, again, the transcendental, I think I had some early intuitions about it, but it wasn't very well formed. And then come like around 18, 19, through some different set of influences, a very close friend, really my closest friend, he and I started having conversations where we suddenly found ourselves curious about like the inner worlds and altered states of consciousness and things I'd never been interested in. And the next thing I knew, people were giving me books on Eastern philosophy and meditation, which I also knew nothing about. And I just dove head first. I can't even explain why. It was like I was just like a moth to the flame. It was obviously like in my makeup to suddenly become out of the blue, sort of become semi-obsessed with, this journey towards what I thought, whatever I called it, enlightenment or self-realization. And my first introduction was through Yogananda's teachings. He's one of those people, like, God, that book, Autobiography of a Yogi, was seminal in so many people's lives that I know is kind of a starting point for them, which is fascinating to me. I almost became a monk in his order. I was very into his approach at the time in my early 20s. I say, fortunately now, I did not go down that path, and of monastic path, that is. And for different reasons, my attention kind of drifted from that path, and I got a little bit more. I was very interested in teaching meditation. It wasn't possible in the context of his organization to teach it. I got interested in the whole mindfulness world because I was going back to college, and I was really interested in marrying I had taken some time away from school, and I was interested in marrying my interest in meditation at the time, my real strong interest, with my return to academics. And I knew that people were starting to research meditation, and mindfulness was kind of in its early embryonic sort of study and research on that. And so I got into that. I became a kind of a well-known mindfulness researcher, and that became more of my practice. And then that went on again for several more years. And I had this conflicted relationship with meditation, quite honestly. I had come to believe that it was necessary. It was like a requirement for realizing what I was aspiring to realize. But I actually didn't much care for meditation in a lot of respects. I struggled with it. I struggled with my mind, with concentration practice, which was kind of more the emphasis in the techniques I was practicing, both within the Buddhist tradition and earlier the yogic tradition. And then I happened upon a teacher who was teaching a little bit more in a non-dual kind of, what some people would call kind of a more direct path, more sudden sort of path to awakening, and was on a retreat 2001, and that was, you know, a real turning point in my own journey, to be sure. I basically, you know, discovered on that retreat, really the first day of it, that what I'd been searching for was already here. It was what I actually was. And that was actually an unbelievable, shocking discovery. I mean, it would be like thinking, I mean, on the order of, I don't know what to compare it to, it'd be, but on the order of imagining you didn't have eyes, and then suddenly realizing, you look in the mirror and you realize, I've been looking for eyes all along, and I've had eyes and I've been seeing my whole life, and I thought I didn't have eyes and I couldn't see. I mean, it was like that. It was dumbfounding. Like, how did I miss it? It was actually what I was, and what everything is. And it just felt like searching just came to a screeching halt. And I remember actually crying many, many tears for a couple of days that felt some combination of coming home, which was a sort of the joyful aspect of it, and then this bittersweet kind of sense that, wow, I had thought for 2 decades that I wasn't home. How kind of almost heartbreaking that was, like that I actually thought something was missing. And that's what we tend to think. We tend to think that actually something, that there is actually separation, and I have to do something to cut through that somehow, and to realize that separation has never existed, actually. So yeah, it was quite a moment in my life, and I would say the rest of my journey, and a lot, it's an oversimplification to say it this way, but I will. That has been an ongoing integration of that. I sometimes joke, like, seeing in that moment that everything was the divine in a very real sense. Everything was the divine, the dance of the divine, dance of the absolute. I think my journey has been one of coming to see again and again and again that everything actually means everything. Not just some things, but everything. Like the radical inclusivity of that, which is everything. Because, of course, you know, the interpretive mechanisms, as we were saying earlier, are kind of constantly in this process of reinforcing difference and distinction. So the everything thing is like, can be, what do you mean everything? Everything is different. How could it all be of one thing, of one essential nature? In any case, you know, in the wake of that experience in the early 2000s, I wrote that book, Too Intimate for Words, and I wrote another book, and I really started to share more about this. I mean, I would do it here and there. I obviously was sharing through writing and creation of music as well, as was mentioned. I write music about all of this and have been for a long time, 30 years. No, longer than that, goodness, 40 years. Wow. But I didn't really start sharing in earnest in the kind of ways that I'm doing now. And it really started just before COVID, I would say, where right after my last book came out, and I just felt like, yeah, it's time to start speaking more. I mean, I'm a born teacher. I love. I kind of discovered academic teaching later in my life. I've been a researcher for many years, mostly studying meditation. And I love to teach. It was just like my system is just made to do it. And so I felt somehow with the last book that I think I have something, there's something now that's more ready, more ripe somehow to share after all these years. And did a retreat before, and then COVID hit. And then I started offering a lot of stuff over Zoom during COVID, which people were kind of hungry for. And yeah, and I've just been continuing to share more and more because it's such a love. It's such an absolute joy to explore all of this with people.
Well,
There was the kind of Reader's Digest version.
Yeah, no, it's great. So can I feed you back the line that I wrote down from the retreat you're on? Was it with is Andrew Cohen? Is that who you're
Andrew Cohen. Okay. Yeah.
And
Not someone, by the way, that I would ever recommend anyone study with, but he's a complicated person. And
okay.
Yeah. Just to say,
Right.
he stopped teaching for a while and restarted teaching. And I mean, I think he had a lot of gifts, as many teachers do, but yeah, that's a long story I won't get into, but yeah.
Well, we appreciate your candor.
Yeah.
But let me, so I'll give you back the line that I wrote down, because that really struck me, that at some point, I think he's sharing what Papa G said to him, something like, I'm so glad you found a friend that you'll never see.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I mean, at the time when I heard that, it was like, it was experienced as this kind of collapse of the subjective and the objective, like that sense of, because there was no, I could see the way in which there was no seer and there was no seen, there was just seeing. And in that sense, it was like, it couldn't be seen, the friend you'll never see. It's very paradoxical, right? It's like, well, it's friend sounds like an object, you have this friend, like I have my friends, and they're objects in the sense of they're not me, right? I'm in a relationship with them. But this was a peculiar friend because it was like, in a sense, I was in a relationship. That's why I could call it the friend. But on the other hand, it was me, which is why I couldn't see it, because you can't see yourself, because you are yourself. You're not an object. You're beyond the subject-object kind of seeming division. So yeah, that was a powerful moment. I remember when I heard those words. Yeah.
And it's such a seemingly, I mean, Papa G, it's concise and yet
there's a lot packed into that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad you found a friend that you'll never see.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
Exactly. Yeah. The friend that you'll never. It's like, what do you mean? It's like, because it mic dropped, like, and also like mind stop too, because
right.
Like, wait a minute, a friend, but I can't see the friend, but I'm so glad you found this friend, but you can never see it. What the hell are you talking about? It's like gibberish, but it actually makes perfect sense from the perspective, of, what's seeing, you could say, because of course, what's seeing can't be seen. It can be, it's very paradoxical, because what's seeing is inseparable from everything that's seen. So in a sense, all you're seeing is is the seer. So in that sense, yes, it can be seen. So that would be the next step after, like, you can't see it. It's like, oh no, actually you can see it as everything. So
yeah. I think it was Saint Francis, right? What you're looking for is where you're looking from.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you just rest right there and let that work on you, right?
I think, I don't know, a lot of these quotes, they're misattributed. I don't know if this is a misattribution, but I think I heard Meister Eckhart apparently say something like, in the Christian mystic tradition, we're searching for God with her eyes, kind of notion. Like, yeah, I mean, it's like, I know, as you're sitting here right now, it's like, well, what's looking through your eyes? I mean, life is looking through your eyes, right? The infinite life. There it is. That's no more needs to be said.
Oh, that's beautiful. So you have these 4 books, and really what I think I heard you say is Too Intimate for Words is really the thread that goes through all of them. And yet, you're on your journey. This is the first one's 2005. And so you're looking and you're refining. And so I just thought it would be fun to have you, if this resonates with you, to kind of walk us through. So it's Too Intimate for Words, and then This Is Always Enough. You could have picked any title. The reason you picked those words to crystallize where you were, right? That's just 3 years later. So I guess I had 2 questions. First, This Is Always Enough, which is like, I mean, I feel like I could meditate just on that for a good amount of time. But I'm also kind of curious about the process. For you, is this just flowing in, and like your hands are on a keyboard, and it's almost like a download, like the same way when you speak, it just kind of comes through? Or or are you working things through in kind of your academic model, or just kind of curious about the creative emergence of
Yeah, the academic stuff doesn't have anything. I mean, in terms of that level, all the discoveries were just, sort of direct experience discoveries, not through any kind of mental frameworks or the like. And I really haven't been much of a scholar of spiritual traditions, really. It's never been my thing, despite my scholarly whatever inclinations as an academic. I mean, this is always enough. It's like, I was thinking about when you read the titles of the books in a way, because I mean, it's hard to really talk about like the titles in terms of some sort of developmental process of unfolding in my own experience. I'm really, it's funny. I'm definitely like kind of a renegade with a lot of this stuff, like I'm a rule breaker. And because I don't think this reality conforms to any sort of linear process. It's just too, we would like it to fall into some sort of neat and tidy kind of unfolding. I mean, and a lot of people describe it like that, and maybe it is that way, and it's not my experience, but it's really hard to describe an unfolding. What I say in the case of the titles is that each of those titles continues to reflect a key understanding that I'm still sharing, basically. So Too Intimate for Words is that this is, entirely beyond language, beyond conceptualization. I mean, it's that close to us. And that the intimacy is that, again, it's so intimate, it's like we have this sense, and it can be quite subtle, of like experiences happening to us. Like it's somehow over there, even subjective states, like the fear or the joy, it's kind of a little bit over there. And then I'm the subject, like receiving that experience somehow. But it's like, no, it's closer than that. It's more intimate than that. It's so intimate that there's no distance. No matter how we might try to like shield ourselves from experience, it's like there's no distance. It's like it's just right. It's right. It's just here, right? No separation. So that's how intimate it is. It's like you can't get much more intimate than that close. And this is always enough, though, reflects like an aspect also of not only is this beyond notions of here and there, it's that close and that intimate and beyond words and concepts, as the first title suggests, and a lot of the book does, mostly poetry in that book. But this turns out to just be, it's beyond comprehension, but it's also this unimaginable fount, this endless source of fulfillment and nourishment and well-being, all the things we're seeking. This is this bounty, and those particular words came interestingly out of, on that same retreat, a follow-up to the first experience, where it was like came crashing down on me that I was what I'd been looking for. Because what happened really shortly after that, maybe later that day even, was I noticed within me that like the seeker picked back up somehow, and was like, and it, kind of the form that it took was, wow, it was kind of fantastical, the experience. It wasn't exactly like phantasmagorical in terms of colors and lights, but more just, it was very intense and very powerful. And I could kind of feel like a certain normalcy kind of was settling in, a kind of like, and I was like, no, I kind of want a little bit more of that juicy, I could feel that kind of grasping. I was like, what the? And I remember saying to myself, are you kidding me? Like, where could that possibly be coming from? When you were just shown what you were shown, I was like almost embarrassed, like that there was this like grasping for something more, like greedy or something. Like I've been given the whole universe, And as I could feel that energy, honestly, this is the only time this has ever happened in my life, before or after, I would say that I heard a voice. And I can't really explain how this happened in this way. But that voice said, right in the middle of that feeling of like wanting something more, the voice said, isn't this enough? And I was flabbergasted. And I was like, talk about like being like put in your place. Like I felt like, like the devotee is put in his or her place. Like, can you see that this is enough? And then the voice had a little more to say, which was, can you feel how much grace is actually being poured forth in every instant?
Mhm.
And yeah, that's a good way to suddenly stop seeking. Because it's what's happening right now. I mean, literally, like the life that is alive as us, as everything, is the pouring forth of this grace, of this unbelievable vitality and nourishment and life giving, right? I mean, life is being given right now, isn't it? And the very arising of the moment is the giving forth of life, the bounty of life. And it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, it's right here. It's staring us in the face. It shines as every moment, as every experience, as every thought, every feeling, every sensation, every perception, every insight, every moment of struggle. It shines forth as all of it. And that is its pouring forth. That is its benevolence. That is its bounty. And yeah, that's what This Is Always Enough is really trying to highlight, that book. And then Searching for a Rain in a Monsoon, which was a subsequent book a few years later, was really, I mean, the title says it all. It's my favorite title. Like, there we are, there I was, that in that 5 years before Searching for Rain in a Monsoon was written, imagining that I was somehow in the desert, and where is the rain? Where is the bounty? And meanwhile, I was actually in a monsoon being drenched by this. We all are, because we are it. And so that's kind of it's almost like each book is kind of just, and the titles reflect that kind of the same ultimate message, but maybe just a slightly different evocation of an aspect of the understanding. And then This Extraordinary Moment is, I actually didn't want that title. A better title, I believe still, is the original title I came up with. The publisher won out and called it This Extraordinary Moment. But the original
I noticed this. You had another title. I was going to ask you that.
I did. Yeah. The original title was This Is Not What You Think It Is.
It's not what you think it is.
It's not what you think it is.
Yeah.
And we actually think that it is what we think it is.
Yes.
You think you're sitting in a room, and I think I'm sitting in a room. But what we call sitting in a room is a dance of the most inconceivable radiance, and that's not mere poetry. It's actually, it's actually what's going on. And all my work really now centers around doing whatever I can with words and in the way that I try to speak about it and write about it, to point people back to exploring their experience kind of outside of the context of what they imagine it to be conceptually, which is if there's any stumbling block in all of this, in my view, it's imagining that we actually do believe that we know what this is already. And then we can kind of foreclose on that knowledge, just as we can foreclose on any knowledge, even in a more non-spiritual or just human sense, right? If I think I know the answer, and then you come along and you have another perspective, I'm not going to be open to that perspective, probably, if I think I've already figured it out, right? So there's a way in which we kind of imagine we've already figured it out, and language is very powerful in this regard. It's very facile. It's like we really do feel as if we have words to capture this and characterize it. And in some sense we do, but in another sense we don't at all. And it's not that difficult in my mind, in my experience, and sharing with others, to see just what I'm saying, and just to say to everyone that's gathered here, contemplating the words that I'm saying now in my conversation with Anne is like the best place to look is in your experience about what I'm talking about, nowhere else, not in your concepts. I mean, you can play with the words conceptually and try to understand them. It's natural, but it's looking at your experience and discovering, as I say, the ways in which it deviates from what we think it is. And there's a lot of different ways that I point that out. And basically, which ends up challenging a lot of consensus reality sort of viewpoints that we have about what's going on here, including maybe most importantly, separation. that's a concept. It's not an actual. It's weird. We're actually never experiencing separation, but we imagine we are.
Yeah, it's actually not possible.
You're correct. Although the power of the interpretive frameworks are such that we would say that we are, in a sense, having an experience of separation out of those believed, constructs, for sure. We have that sense, right? Of if it were only conceptual, then maybe it would not be all that convincing, but in the same way that you're watching a movie and the next thing you're crying about the fact that something happened, there's nothing but pixels on the screen. If you were only seeing the pixels on the screen and not somehow believing it and then feeling the reaction to that belief, right, it wouldn't have the same kind of impact that it does. And there's kind of an analog there to, it's not just that I have a conceptualized notion about, but in a sense, it can kind of feel like it as well. In some sense, it can seem as if it really, it can, it's not just that I have an idea that, I just met you, Anne, but there's some sense that, you actually are the same from moment to moment, but actually you're not, you're completely, utterly, entirely different every nanosflash instant. And again, our experience, if we just look at experience itself, it will show us what it is, which can't really be said ultimately, which is amazing.
So we say we can't actually experience separation. At the same time, we can certainly believe we can. And if
it can seem very much so, it looks, when you look at a rainbow, it looks like there's a rainbow there. But when you go to investigate the rainbow, you will find nothing.
You put your hands, right, exactly. You go to try to, right. Just try to lean against that rainbow, right?
It is, I know that Tibetans use that metaphor a lot, and in the Dzogchen tradition, and it's such a good metaphor on a lot of levels, but one is, exactly that. It's, the appearance is vivid. The appearance of this moment is quite vividly, exactly, in a sense, how it's appearing to you. I see a tree in the corner of this room I'm in and a blue couch next. It's very vivid. It's very clear, and I know what awareness is woven into. It sounds like hearing a little bit of some of the teachings some of you are involved with, that awareness is kind of a key part of that. And it's like, we could say that, this function of knowing, this function of that which is perceiving, whatever that is like this just crystal clear. So everything appears very vividly to it. So the appearance is very vivid, like the vividness of a rainbow. And yet, when you go to look for what all this vivid appearance is made of, as I say, you come up empty-handed every time. You can't determine what it's made of, which is, it's such a paradox that the closer you look at the vivid appearance, the less clear it becomes what it actually is. And until eventually you discover it's unfindable. It doesn't resolve as being something. It's not a thing. As the Buddhists would say, it's empty of thingness. It's empty of, it doesn't, the way I would describe it is, it's like, let's take you. And I think seeing this with other people can be often a really powerful doorway into it, because we're so used to the persons that we are, in a sense. So let's say I'd known you for a long time. And through knowing you for a long time as a friend, I'd come to learn a lot more about who you are and how you tick, how you think about things, how you perceive things, how you feel about things, right? Your passions, your loves, your curiosities. And I would feel on one level like I'm getting to have a better handle on who Anne is, kind of the flavor of Anne. And in a sense, this is again very paradoxical. You do have a kind of a flavor. Each one of us has almost, we could say, like a signature that makes us, the unique expressions of reality. But again, when you go to find what the taste of Anne is, get to the bottom of who Anne is, or the bottom of who John is, or the bottom of who any of us is, you will look from now until the end of time, and you'll never get to the end of the exploration, because you're infinite. And that's a word I use a lot, and I mean, when I use that word, I mean endless. There's no end. And I never reached a final conclusion of who Anne is. And now I know who you are. Now I've defined you. I've identified you. I've pinpointed who Anne is. I've gotten to the essence of Anne. No, because you're unfathomable. You're Walt Whitman said it in Leaves of Grass. We are vast, we contain multitudes. And that's how we're really vast, like as in infinite. So I just look and I just find more, and I look and I find more. And then whenever I find there and I look at what I found and I look at that, and there's more there, and there's more there, and there's more there, and it's endless. And how amazing is that I never get to the bottom of anything, because it's bottomlessly rich in its nature. And this completely flies in the face of our knowledge, because our knowledge essentially sort of comes to conclusions about what things are, and then we name them, and then we have some sense that I know what it is, it's this, as opposed to that. And that's how you have this and that, right? That's how you have all this seeming distinction and differentiation. And what's interesting is that this is the way life seems to show up. It shows up as very differentiated, right? All the flavors of life, the qualities and textures of life, sweet and sour and happy and sad, and they're very unique, just as each one of us is like, again, like a different flavor of this. But at the base of all of this distinction, these distinct flavors and qualities, by just exploring what is this flavor? I mean, you could take the simplest thing, like the taste of a food. You don't have to do anything esoteric. Just look at a food. I know exactly what this is. This is the taste of vanilla or chocolate or strawberry or whatever. And then ask yourself the question, this is what I do in my work. What is the taste of chocolate actually? What makes chocolate chocolate? You're immediately in the unknown. You cannot determine that. And yet there it is, paradoxically, like the rainbow. Shows up vividly. Chocolate, it's very distinctive, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know what it is, and you also simultaneously have absolutely no effing clue what it is. How weird is that? But it's our actual experiences. We don't know what anything is. We can never get to the bottom of it. We're in a free fall of indeterminacy and unresolvability and inconceivability. And how wondrous is that this is so open-ended, because it's infinite, right? But it can look like anything. It can look like all this finite stuff, right?
Yes. And we can believe it to be finite. And we can
including what we think of as ourselves, right?
We can back into that really quickly. So let me read one of my favorite quotes. It's a little long, but what I want to do is I want to invite, so it's one thing to listen to this if in this particular iteration of life, you had some great day and and nothing is really seeming so solid anyway, and this just kind of lifts you up. It's another thing to listen when what you have going on is something different than that. Uh-huh. So I want to read this quote, and then I want to invite anyone that would like to really ask a question. But let me read the quote first, and then I'll cue it up. Mm-hmm. This is from the Back Gap interview from with John and Rich Archer. The freedom comes from actually investigating what it is actually made of experientially, which is what John was just saying, because what we discover is it isn't what we thought it was, that it transcends what we think it is. It is utterly beyond what we think it is. And it turns out to be, it's God. It's made of infinity. It's made of reality. And that's not something you can say what it actually is, because it's infinite. Because, and then that is what turns out to be incredibly liberating. So I just want to invite anyone who is not feeling particularly liberated right now, this is a brave crowd. If in this particular, I would use myself as an example in a moment, but I've been listening to John all day and I'm just like, yes, I agree. But anyone that's not feeling free right now, that feels like they got like a thing, it seems pretty damn solid to them. I really, and John's a pro. So I just invite a question, if it's you, and if you have a prompt, because it is exactly this exploration with someone who's actually feeling like it's solid that is really the best way that John can give us all the gift of putting this into practice live. Is how I would put that. And I just want to invite anyone, including what could be a physical pain and a physical sensation, or an emotional issue. So, and Joe, am I seeing your hand? Yeah, there we go. We got Joe, right? One of the bravest guys in the room.
I'll go ahead and lead off. Thanks,
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, Joe.
Hi, John. Thanks for being here with us. And I have, I had no idea why I raised my hand. Let's see, because Anne mentioned something there at the end that brought up something else. Okay, I'm going to throw out a couple of things here, I think. And early on in the interview, Anne was talking about something you said about well-being that's not conditioned. And then after that, I think it said on circumstances or something.
Mm-hmm.
An unconditioned well-being.
Correct.
Okay, and the thing that immediately came up is that this body feels like crap right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, absolute crap. I'm okay sitting in this chair, very comfortable. I love this chair, my favorite chair,
Yeah.
looking at people. But there's shit going on, and it's just, But so I love that part about unconditioned, because when she first mentioned well-being, I thought, oh man, I'm not there. And I see now their connection. I don't know if I can put words to this. But the quote that Anne read, something I remembered from the quote, I don't remember a lot of it, but something about that, everything is made of the infinite. It's kind of what you've been talking about. Mm-hmm. This is all made of the infinite. Right. And I was just, looking at my hand and thinking, yeah, this is made. And then the thought comes in, no, not yet. You haven't done enough work yet. You're not ready to get that yet. Right. And I can see that that's all mine. I mean, it's just right. The stories just coming in. It's like, no, you've got to do X, Y, and Z first before you.
Remember, I said I was a rule breaker, and that's a rule that really worthy of breaking right there. Okay. That idea that somehow there's a bunch of requirements, you got to do your whatever penance, or your, sit by the temple for 30 years or meditate for lifetimes before somehow you can be what you are. I mean, it's very common. I believed that myself for a long time. And so, yeah, you sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. If you wanted to say something more about that, or I can.
The only thing I would say is that I'm very, very thankful that I saw that thought coming in. Because I don't know how many times that's come in and just hadn't recognized it. But
yeah, no, that is powerful, because you can notice it and realize that, it's just like, I mean, thoughts are so interesting. I mean, interestingly, like you're talking about the hand, there's infinity, right? It's like, and this is one way of sort of engaging with the practice that I'm sharing is, that what's so convenient, we could say, is that everything that arises is the same doorway into that infinity. So it also includes those thoughts. So what are the thoughts made of? They're also made of infinity. And the doubts are made of infinity if doubts arise. And so that's, like I say, it's convenient because you don't have to go. This is one of the aspects of the unconditional nature of this infinite well of being, is that it doesn't depend. It's like the ocean, right? The ocean doesn't depend upon how the phenomenal waves are appearing. All of the waves, it doesn't depend upon having a certain set of waves arranged in the right, correct way, which is how we often think of well-being, where we're sort of, the well-being that seems to depend upon things is our usual strategizing, right? To arrange my life circumstances and experiences in just the right order and way, and get everything sort of in place. And now I've got a handle on it, right? Now I've kind of got well-being seemingly under control. And then of course, things get taken away, like in moments of not feeling well physically, let's say, or our relationship ends or whatever. I mean, it could be anything. We're suddenly blindsided by something that goes a direction that we wish it didn't go. And then we feel as if we have lost touch with, that sense of well-being. And then what we do is we go back on a search to regain that sense of well-being. This is the ordinary. And there's actually nothing wrong with that, in a sense. Like I wasn't feeling well a few weeks ago, and I did whatever I could to feel better, to regain my health, So I say that that's like the ordinary kind of approach to well-being, is sort of curating a life of well-being. Fantastic. You could say kind of enhancing our lives in all the ways that we can find to enhance the quality of our lives and the quality of our relationships, and as we, whatever we feel is going to be unique to each one of us, what we consider to be quality, of course. So we're all on that journey. I call that the first approach, the ordinary approach to well-being or happiness. I say that if you liken life to a dream, it's like, how can I dream the best damn dream possible? How can I just milk as much as I can out of this in terms of well-being? Just curate a life, right? And as part of that, try to have as little lack of well-being as possible, right? And try to not have too many negative experiences and circumstances, so-called. That's like approach one, I call it. And approach two is what I'm talking about, which is like entirely like operating like orthogonally to that. It's just completely different. Approach one is, how can I dream the best dream possible? Approach two, to put it in the simplest way, is, what is the dream? Before I assume that I need to improve it, like that, what I was talking about, this is always enough. There's a lot of assumptions somehow built into, sort of whatever consensus reality of human culture is, that this is not enough somehow, right? That there's something missing. Well, is that actually true? And can we actually explore experience in certain ways, again, outside of our conventional ways of holding it, of thinking about it, and discover that, no, actually, each instant, each moment, no matter how it looks descriptively, how it seems to be presenting, is in fact they say in the Buddhist tradition, the shining forth of reality, isn't it? I mean, it truly is the shining forth. Our deepest heartbreak is the shining forth of the radiance of reality. What else could it be? I mean, it's made of, isn't that the most amazing? To me, I never stop marveling at how amazing a question it seems to me to ask, which is, what is this? We all would say, if I ask you, are you alive right now? You would say, yes, I can feel that aliveness. Or, are you aware now? I can feel that awareness of the aliveness. In either case, Sat and Chit, and like in Sat Chit Ananda, the awareness and the existence are inseparable. But if you just feel either one, that sense of aliveness, a sense of being, it's unavoidable. You can feel it, right? The sense of something here, we could call it life. Now, as you feel that, explore that sense of aliveness experientially. Like, explore what it is. Like, what is life? What is it actually constituted of? What are the particles that make up life? What are the subatomic particles that make up life? That's very much an abstract question, but it's not meant to be addressed sort of analytically at the level of the mind. It's meant to just be felt. Because you're actually feeling. See, it's very non-abstract, isn't it? You're feeling something that we have a label for, life. Feeling, let's say, the moment, the presence of the moment. And what is that? What is actually here that's being felt? Actually, it's not what we're calling it. That's just a very rough sort of like, again, like trying to describe something that's ultimately infinite. You can't do it. But if you feel what's here, you can start to get a sense of just how fathomless it is, how bottomlessly indescribable and rich it is, and in that sense, infinite. And that is true of every experience that's arising. And one of the reasons that's powerful, to come back to the point you were making about the unconditional well-being, is that, again, we would say, let's take two states like sadness, where we would say, there's more of an absence of well-being, grief, And then joy, where we would say there's more of a presence of well-being and that kind of a state. By asking the question, what is sadness made of and what is joy made of, one can discover that they're made of this, they're different tastes, they're different flavors, but they ultimately have one taste. You could say the taste of existence, the taste of being, the taste of presence. And in that sense, when you discover that, the one taste of everything, you're discovering the unconditional well-being. There's something about the nature of this fundamentally that is that's present as the very basis of everything. And that's discoverable. And it doesn't depend, in other words, it doesn't, like the presence of reality, the presence of life clearly doesn't depend upon how the life is showing up, how it's presenting, right? Any more than the pixels on the screen depend upon whether the pixels look like a monster or a gorgeous creature that we want to make love to, right? It's the same radiance, isn't it? That's the basis of both of those particular forms. And the same holds true, I would say, for what we call, waking life. That's the, again, it's not conditioned by anything. I mean, another reason it's not conditioned by anything is that there's nothing outside of it to condition it, right? And that turns out to be another very powerful doorway into the unconditional, is to see that there's only one thing here that looks like a lot of stuff, but it's just one thing. Sorry, I know that was a long-winded response to your wonderful question, but hopefully it maybe shed a little light on what you're curious about. And if not, you're happy to continue. I mean, you're welcome to ask again if something is surprising to ask.
Yeah, I have no words to put to that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And neither do I. So, well, we're in the same boat. So, there was one thing though I was reflecting on, like that. And maybe we can even do I could even do a little guided inquiry if you wanted.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Would you like that? Would that be okay?
Love it.
Okay, cool. So this comes out of, I was reflecting on it this morning because I got an email with someone asking a question that I hear maybe the most common thing that comes up for people in all of this investigation. And this person was talking about the sense of the presence and this sense of, he says, I know that this presence doesn't come and go, that it is, because it's the only thing that exists. He goes, but I feel like there's times when I'm more aware of this presence, and then I feel like I lose awareness of this presence. And then I have to make effort, even though I know it shouldn't require effort because the presence is here effortlessly. So this was kind of his query in his email to me. And if anyone has had a similar experience, then maybe you'd be able to relate to what I want to share that much more. So when we hear things like presence or awareness or beingness or the isness, happens so quickly and outside of consciousness, we have some sense that this is something that I am in some sort of relationship with, that I can approach, I can grow closer to, I can become more aware of, more cognizant of, more connected to. And then along with that notion of being sort of apart from it, and then I can approach it, I can discover it, and so on. I can contact it. Along with that is the sense that I can also lose it, right? I can lose contact with it. Now, what's the common denominator in all of that is the sense of being an individual in relationship to, let's say, the presence of reality, this boundless presence, infinite presence. So here's an inquiry to explore with me if you'd like to. So just for a moment, just feel your own existence. Feel your own individuality, if you can get a sense of like your own subjectivity. I'm an individual. I'm John, living in the world, this individual being. I can feel my sort of localized existence here. And there's a sense of here, and then there's what's not here, over there, which is not me, right? This is our ordinary sense. So feel that sense of individuality, like you being a person living in a world. Feel it as the aliveness that you are, that feels kind of first person, like here. Now, you can feel the presence of it, right? That's how you know the aliveness is here. It's present. Feel the presence of aliveness that you would say is you. Now, we ordinarily imagine that this sense of the individual that's navigating the spiritual path and trying to become whatever, free or more realized or awakened, again, that there's a sense of a subject existing in relationship to various objects, both outside of the body-mind, but also interior to the body-mind, which we still have a sense of like, I'm having this experience of whatever, joy, fear, and so on. But you feel the presence, come back to the presence of you. It's very obvious, like it's just undeniable, the sense of this presence. Now, feel the presence of what you would call the body, like the body is just a label. Feel the presence of what the body seems to be, where it seems to be sort of located in space. All right. Now, again, we just have this deep-seated kind of assumption of the body represents kind of the edge of who we are. And then on the other side of the body is not body, right? Not me, the world. We're feeling the presence of the body. Now, feel what you might think of as the air that surrounds the body that, we breathe in and nourishes the body. So that air is separate from us, right? There's a body and there's air that comes into the body, right? Well, we can feel the presence of the air, right? As we, right? There's the air. We can feel maybe a sense of the air, feel the presence of the air. Now come back and feel the presence of the body. Now notice that you actually can't find a place where the presence of what you call the body comes to an end, and the presence of what's not the body, the surrounding of the body, the world outside of the body, begins. You literally can't find it. There's just presence. If you feel something like the world outside the body, how do you know there's a world? Well, because there's a sense of it being present. It's not just an idea. But again, it's felt as presence, isn't it? So we feel everything as presence. This is the singularity. It's like a continuum of experiencing this presence. It shows up as differentiated and is described as all the distinctive phenomena. Like sound, for example. Sound is present, the sound of my voice, right? We could say it's showing up seemingly as in a distinct kind of domain or dimension, distinct from the felt sense of the body or distinct from thought. If you think for a moment about, I'm hearing sounds, have that thought, and you can distinguish the thought as a presence, that's something that's present, a phenomena, and the sound, that's something that's present, right? But notice how what's showing up as two distinct phenomena, sound and thought, are absolutely blended. You cannot find where one ends. Where does the sound end and the thinking about the sound begin? They're seamless. They're a continuum, just like the body and whatever surrounds the body. So we're literally feeling right now this continuum of experiencing, or this seamless presence of being. Those are synonyms. I'm putting words to something that's beyond words. From this standpoint, all there is presence. Presence of what is. That's the only thing that exists. And this presence of what is, we could call it reality, shows up as all this incredible multiplicity and unique apparitions and appearances and flavors and qualities and textures that make up, what we might call the human life, this experience, all the colors of life. But this presence is singular because all that we imagine to be distinct and differentiated shows up, and we only know as presence, this one presence. So it's like a differentiated world on the one hand, how we can distinguish this from that, and yet there's no separation at the same time. Feel that. There's no separation. So there's no being apart from this presence. You're made of the presence. Everything is made of the presence. There's no going in and out of presence. There's no one separate from presence to go in and out of it. There's no being cast out of presence any more than a wave could be cast out of the sea when the wave is born. So any experience that arises is never cast out of the totality of presence. It is an expression of the presence of life, the presence of this mystery. So we're always feeling presence because there's nothing else to feel. There's nothing else that exists. And it's absolutely impossible to lose it. It's indestructible, inviolable. Impossible to get away from, impossible to have more of or less of. It's always full. It's full of its infinitude. It's, as I was saying earlier, it's never-ending fount of vitality springing forth as each appearance, as each momentary perception. But no perception ever departs from this ground, from this presence, because every perception is made of presence. So you don't have to have, this is the unconditioned part, you don't have to have a certain set of perceptions that you may imagine bring you closer to the presence, because every perception is its expression. So it doesn't matter what you're experiencing, because all of your experience is presence. Doesn't matter what you're thinking, doesn't matter what you're feeling from this perspective. This is unconditioned by what it looks like, unconditioned by what it feels like. And this is never absent. Presence can't be absent. Its apparent absence is what's present. That's what I mean by indestructible. And we're not standing outside of that, noticing that and grooving on that. We are that presence. There's never been, the wave never really became autonomous and separated itself out from the sea. It just kind of looks that way, kind of feels that way sometimes, can be described that way, but look again. Where did the wave begin? It began wherever the ocean began. It's one thing that appears as all this multiplicity. We often think in meditation traditions that we can somehow lose touch with this. We've like drifted away and we've got to come back to it. But really, the nature of this is to drift, to move. It's alive, it drifts, but it's always drifting into itself. It's never drifting away from itself. It's just drifting into another version of itself, another way it can appear. There's no drifting away from reality. How could that be? There's only reality. I'm happy to, I don't know how we're doing with time here, but I'm happy to, if anyone else had something that they'd like to share or explore, I'd love to hear from anyone that's on the call.
Wonderful. Marisol, thank you.
Mm.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for being here with us. So I wanted to ask, how do you approach long-standing beliefs that have been around since childhood that are always like in the background, kind of controlling things until it's seen. And even when it's seen, sometimes it's still the thoughts and the beliefs that arise are so intense that it's difficult to not fall into it again. Is there any practice that you have to help with that?
I think we all know our particular unique versions of what you just described, right? Where we can suddenly find ourselves even maybe having seen through a particular belief of suddenly it seems to return. And the next thing we know, we're like, seem to be believing it again somehow. Yeah, I think this is, I know we could say at some level, could be explained sort of in terms of the power of the habitual nature of some beliefs, that they've been we've spent maybe a better part of a lifetime, cultivating them and repeating them and believing them sort of over and over again. And so, there's this idea apropos that in the Tibetan Dzogchen tradition of sort of seeing into the inconceivable nature of this, which basically refutes all beliefs. It shows that all the beliefs are wrong. Everything we believe is wrong because the beliefs are about this, and this can't be believed. Let me give you an example why this can't believe that maybe is simple. Okay, I want you to think about this moment right now. You already failed, right? You can't think about this moment. Why you can't think about the moment? Because the minute you think about the moment's gone. So the thought just can't keep up. The moment's just poof, it's just poof. So this is unthinkable. So all our beliefs are suggesting, oh, not only is this thinkable, but I can tell you exactly what it means and why it's important or not important, or what might be a threat to me or a benefit to me. This entire thing is built on it's a house of cards that in one moment of seeing how inconceivable and unthinkable this is, can come crashing down. But as you said, those beliefs seem to it's like a trick birthday candle. You keep blowing it out and it keeps like relighting, right? So what they say in the Tibetan tradition is, you see there's this recognition that this is beyond conceivability, that can really be, profoundly transformative, seeing that and then liberating in that moment to see that. Because why it's liberating is, even the notion of not being liberated, of being bound somehow or stuck somehow or identified, is all conceptualized. It's a conceptualization of something that it can't be conceived. So in that sense, there's no delusion, there's no identification, there's no contraction, all the things we imagine needing to overcome. So one could see that. And then in the Tibetan tradition, they say, then the process, if there's a process that unfolds, is one of gaining more confidence in what has been seen. Because the confidence is what starts to make it less and less likely that the trick birthday candle will keep relighting, and that we'll fall back into believing that this is limited or lacking or divided, or kind of our usual standard fare of beliefs about this, right? Because then it's like better now. It's like you've seen, like, no, this is unlimited and without lack. This is whole and complete, always, always, always. I'm never apart from this. As I was saying in that little inquiry, there's nothing but this undivided presence. And then if beliefs reappear, like, I feel separate from this, I feel like I've lost this, I feel like I'm missing something, I don't deserve this, whatever the beliefs might be, and I don't know in your case. You might need to return to the recognition, in a sense, to go back to the recognition that, no, this is truly undivided, as I was trying to point to in that little investigation. And then what that does is it refutes all the beliefs. When you see that this is undivided, there's no subject object here. There's just a flow of experiencing. Now there's no one in search of something. That's gone. In that moment, that's gone, because there's not two things here. That's why it's so peaceful to see that. It's so non-agitated. It's so freeing. It's so, it's like equanimity, because there's nothing missing and no one missing it, right? So But then when you start to, if a belief reappears of I'm missing something, I'm lacking something, then you can go back to that recognition, which is why, people say, we'll come back to meeting with me or reading something. I mean, that's the value of teachings, theoretically, is to remind us of what's actually not missing. And sometimes it's a process of being reminded over and over and over again that can start to just make it, the beliefs then can start to reappear, and then they're just like, nice try, it's just less believed. And I think that just happens more and more naturally. And you know what? There's times when we just feel as if we've totally lost touch with it. We're like lost in some turmoil of beliefs. And it's like, it can be really helpful, even though it can feel like that is a kind of a loss in a sense. Remember that there is no losing this. So even when we seem completely identified and lost in belief and lost in thought, nothing has actually been lost, because thought actually also doesn't exist as an autonomous phenomena apart from the sea. Thought is not lost. It's never lost. And we gain more and more confidence in that this can't be lost. The presence can't be lost. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you.
Yeah. On the heels of that, let me give a real specific resource that I found. First of all, John has his own website, John Astin, Astin. But also he has an Instagram, which is just wonderful. I don't know if you do that or someone does that for you, but they are just gorgeous. And this is always it.
My daughter's responsible for the images. I'm responsible for the words.
Yeah, I mean, well, so whoever's doing it, I mean, it's just gorgeous. It's such a gift. So this is always it, all smushed together. And in John's description, I wrote myself a note. One of the, how you give yourself a little description on Instagram. One of John's is lover of existence. And it's like, oh, right on, man. So the other little resource I found in doing the background is simplehabit.com. Simplehabit.com. And John has a number of quick little meditations, little 5-minute glimpses, allowing thinking to be as it is, just aware, freedom from your thoughts. So little ways to have this message come in a way that might be accessible.
If I could just say one thing about
Yes,
that if anyone likes using meditation apps, if that's your thing, I'm on one free app called Insight Timer. I have a lot of really little short inquiries and meditations on that. And Simple Habit is a subscription app, and I do have a number of series that I developed for them. And then I'm on another subscription app, Sam Harris's Waking Up app, which I have a bunch of meditations on there and inquiries on that app as well. And then if you want, on my website, there's a lot of just freely downloadable resources on there from meditations I've created and talks I've given. And it's like, there's a lot there. If you want to explore any of that, it's there for the exploration. So, yeah.
Yeah. And in addition to your YouTube channel, and there's a lot there, and there's,
and that can all be accessed via the website. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And that's another way to get it. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah. So let me pause for a minute. Like I said, I have plenty of questions. So let me pause and see if anyone else has a question or something to bring forward.
I like what one of the comments, imaginary chains. I'm just seeing that. That's perfect. Imaginary chains, and boy, they can feel real as hell sometimes, though. I know. Yep.
So, let's see. So we have about a little under 10 minutes. I heard you speaking about how when you were coming back and after you had dropped out for a little bit and then decided to come back into getting your degree and
dropped out of school.
Going forward, yeah. You wanted to bring your love that you had cultivated while you were out, which is the meditation, and then marry it with the research.
Uh-huh.
And you have plenty of papers about the efficacy of meditation and acceptance-based methods. And I think, at least for me, it's always so helpful to kind of hear how the science is confirming what we know to be experientially so, which is the more you do this, the more you look. Like your advice just then wasn't to go do 6 things. It was to just go back and find the truth of what it is and allow that to kind of melt that ice cube of belief, or that belief in separation. But I'm just curious if you could speak a little bit about what the science is showing. I know it's super exciting. It's confirming everything. But just, so I'd just love to hear your distillation of kind of where we are in terms of what we know, neural network wise with meditation.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say about the science is that, and I thought there would be an opportunity. I came very close to having an opportunity to study more of the kind of approach that I'm sharing, but honestly, the kind of approaches that I'm sharing have not really been studied. I mean, some elements of, you see some work like on open monitoring practices and some more non-dual meditation practices that have been studied a little bit, but mostly what's been studied has been sort of 2 central practices, one being transcendental meditation, which was the first meditation practice that was really researched, and then kind of more mindfulness as it sort of came into the world through Jon Kabat-Zinn's work, and which is very kind of heavily influenced by Vipassana styles of practice within the Buddhist tradition. And that is not really what I teach at all, just to make that clear. But those practices, at least based on the research, certainly continue to suggest that they can be quite beneficial for people in a number of ways. And I think I don't think we fully understand why, but it may be one of the mechanisms is that the kind of style of practice, say, that you find in some of the mindfulness interventions can help to open people up to the, they seem to play a role in what I was talking about to some degree of what psychologists call diffusing from thought. And that basic idea in cognitive science and psychology is that we have a tendency to be fused with thinking, which is essentially means that we believe that our thought accurately represents reality. So we've kind of smeared thinking together with what's happening and imagine that it is what we think it is. And then defusing from thought is to see that thoughts are not facts. They're just interpretations. And that thing is, of course, very much what I'm teaching, although I'm just taking it sort of to the nth degree in terms of questioning thinking. But the amount of that occurs in practices, say like mindfulness again, does seem to help to explain how those practices are helping people, say, dealing with mental health issues like anxiety and depression, helping people with sort of recovering from addiction by giving them sort of new tools for how to navigate with sort of uncomfortable states of mind, essentially, and realizing, as it relates to acceptance, that a lot of the suffering that happens in relationship to our experience comes not from the experiences themselves, but from how we're oriented to them, which tends to be either trying to avoid them or transform them in some way. They're the usual kind of strategies we use when we're confronted with something that we don't like. And this other choice, if you will, of like allowing it just to simply be there as it is without sort of messing with it, without trying to modify it in any way, turns out to be very liberating, because it starts to unhook us from these ideas that a lot of things that we experience are actual threats, which is why we tend to want to avoid them or transform them, because we think they're actually something wrong with them, right? They're evidence of our brokenness, evidence of our flaw, evidence of our lack of wholeness, and so on. When they're not that actually at all, they're just the flow of life, the flow of presence, as I was saying in that little meditation. So yeah, it seems like the research seems to be providing ongoing support for the value of these kinds of meditative sort of investigations into the nature of our experience. And it's certainly also showing up in some of the neuroscience work, suggesting that there's often a kind of lessening of that activity in the brain associated with mental interpretation tends to settle down more often with people practicing meditation, which kind of seems to dovetail with the sense people have of being less sort of dragged around by their interpretations and having even just a little bit more sense of freedom from the interpretations, contacting kind of the context of awareness within which all the interpretations are occurring is often how I think that initially sort of takes root for people in these who are engaging with those kinds of style of practice.
So if I mean, taking that all in, it seems like we're going to end right where we started.
Yes.
Where you said, and I invite you to say it again, if there's one thing you take from this, do you remember what you said?
No, I don't. What did I say?
Well, my memory is what you said is this is not all linear. This is it. You are
right. Yeah.
all is well. Like, I mean, don't just accept because it's going to be easier. Accept because it's true. Accept because it's okay. Accept.
Oh, even more powerful than practicing acceptance, like as an individual who's accepting phenomena. Yeah. Remember that meditation that I did. If it struck you at all, the deepest, the transcendental acceptance, so the transpersonal acceptance, is the acceptance of reality itself. See, reality accepts everything without condition because it is everything. So acceptance is almost like a moot point from that perspective. It's like the ocean doesn't accept the waves, it is the waves, which is, we could say, the most radical welcoming and openness to everything without any resistance, because like right now, there's no resistance to this moment. The moment's already here. It's been allowed 100% by reality. There's the acceptance. So we can see that, and then we get to benefit from that which is already here, the radical acceptance of life itself.
And what I heard you just say is when we do that as an individual, it quiets down the parts of the brain that wants to get into that mechanistic interpretation, dividing up, cogitating, ruminating. It quiets that down. So even as an individual, that's going to allow our direct presence to well-being, even if it's through an experience of agitation. We can be the well-being that is noticing the agitation.
Right, exactly. And this is a key thing that all that mental activity, I mean, it can feel nice when it does settle down somewhat, but even when there's a lot of interpretation going on, that doesn't change the nature of this. And then that can be seen, that in other words, it can't actually stop the infinite overflow of this from happening. And that can be recognized even when the mind's just doing its dance of thinking it knows what this is.
Yeah, the font is still giving.
The font never stops giving because it is everything. And that's that, as they say, what is that? That's the great good news.
Yes, the very, very, very great good news.
It never stops giving, as your very life and your very experience is its fount, is its constant overflowing nourishment. Feel that. We get to feel that every moment.
Wonderful. Well, it is fun to feel that with you, and we all appreciate it. I just get to say it. I get to say thank you again, and just the gift that you are and the gift that you give, and we just appreciate you coming here and sharing it with us. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's really sweet to be with all of you. Wonderful. Thank you again. I'm gonna hand this back to Sina. Thanks. Lots of love. Thanks, folks.
Thank you for watching our Satsang. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to join us live, please remember you can do so by visiting our website, awakening-together.org. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary. Again, our website is awakening-together.org. Remember to click the bell for more notifications and subscribe.